Move it already, lady! The shout cracked through the grocery store parking lot like a slap. 78-year-old Lillian Brooks flinched, her hands tightening around the plastic grocery bags, cutting into her thin fingers. The weight was too much for her fragile arms, but pride kept her upright. One step at a time, just a few more steps to the bus stop. Behind her, an engine revved impatiently. "I don't have all day," the driver yelled again. "You gonna crawl across the lot or what?" Lillian didn't turn around. She'd learned long ago that answering back only made things worse. Her knees trembled as she shuffled forward, the late afternoon heat pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. Sweat trickled along her temples, blurring her vision. One of the grocery bags tore suddenly, a can of soup rolling across the pavement with a hollow clatter. "Ah, for God's sake," the man scoffed. "This is why they shouldn't let people like you shop alone." A few shoppers slowed their steps. Some stared. Most didn't. Lillian bent slowly, painfully, to retrieve the can. Her back screamed in protest. The memory of a stroke 5 years earlier lingered in every movement she made. She reached for the can and nearly lost her balance. The car behind her honked loudly, a sharp, aggressive blast. She gasped, heart jolting. "Watch it," the driver barked. "You trying to get hit?" That was when a firm voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough." The parking lot seemed to pause. The honking stopped. The engine idled. A uniformed police officer stepped between the car and the elderly woman, one hand raised calmly, the other resting near his belt. "Sir," the officer said evenly, "you need to back up. Now." The driver rolled down his window, irritation written all over his face. "She's blocking traffic. I got places to be." "You'll wait, or you can explain your impatience to a judge." The man muttered something under his breath, shifted the car into reverse, and backed away. Silence settled, broken only by the hum of the distant street. The officer turned toward Lillian. She was shaking. Her grocery bags lay scattered at her feet, one split open, oranges rolling away like they were trying to escape. "Ma'am," the officer said gently, crouching down to her level, "are you all right?" Lillian nodded, though tears burned behind her eyes. "I'm fine, just tired." The officer didn't argue. He began picking up the groceries, placing them carefully into new bags from his patrol car. His movements were slow, respectful, the kind that came from someone who'd helped fragile hands before. "Let me help you with these," he said. Lillian hesitated. Pride tugged at her again. "I don't want to be trouble." "You're not even close." She studied his face for a moment. He looked young, early 40s maybe, but his eyes carried something older, weariness, experience, a quiet attentiveness. "Thank you, officer," she said at last. "My name's Daniel Harper," he offered as he lifted the bags. "Where are you headed?" "The bus stop on Jefferson, just 2 blocks." Daniel glanced at the heat shimmering above the asphalt, then at her trembling hands. "I'll walk with you, if that's all right." They started down the sidewalk together, Daniel matching his pace to her careful steps. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lillian sighed softly. "People don't like waiting anymore." Daniel nodded. "Some never learned how." They reached the bus stop bench, cracked and sun-bleached. Daniel set the groceries down gently. "That's kind of you. Most folks don't notice old women like me." Daniel paused. Something in her voice, not bitterness, not anger, just quiet truth. "I notice," he said. As he straightened up, his eyes fell on her wrist, on a faded scar, pale against her dark skin. Long, surgical. Daniel froze, his breath caught. He knew that scar. He'd seen it before, not in person, in a case file. A very old one that had never left him. Lillian noticed the shift immediately. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Daniel swallowed, eyes fixed on her wrist. No, it's just..." His mind raced. 22 years ago, A missing child. A woman questioned, then dismissed. A witness no one believed. A name he hadn't heard spoken aloud since his first year on the force. He looked at her face again, at her eyes, at the way she held herself, careful, guarded, used to being overlooked. "Ma'am, has anyone ever asked you about something that happened a long time ago?" Lillian's expression changed, just for a second, but it was enough. Her lips pressed together. Her gaze drifted away. "Yes," she said quietly, "a long time ago." Daniel's heart began to pound, because he was suddenly certain of one thing. Helping her with groceries was not the reason fate had placed him in that parking lot. And whatever truth Lillian Brooks had carried all these years, it was still waiting to be told. The bus stop bench creaked as Lillian Brooks lowered herself onto it, every movement deliberate, careful. Years had taught her how to move without drawing attention to the pain. Daniel Harper remained standing for a moment, unsure whether to sit beside her or give her space. He chose the middle ground. He rested one knee on the concrete, close enough to feel human, far enough not to crowd her. "You sure you're all right?" he asked again, quieter this time. Lillian nodded, though her hands still trembled slightly as she folded them over her purse. "I will be. I always am." Daniel noticed how practiced the words sounded, not hopeful, not bitter, just factual. The bus schedule rattled faintly in the breeze. Somewhere down the street a siren wailed, then faded. Life kept moving. But Daniel's thoughts were stuck. That scar. He'd seen it in a black and white photo clipped to a yellowed report, a witness image, a woman who had reached through broken glass, a woman whose testimony had been marked unreliable by men who'd never looked twice at her face. He cleared his throat. "My grandmother," he said suddenly, "used to take the bus everywhere, wouldn't let anyone drive her, said it kept her independent." Lillian smiled faintly. "That sounds like a smart woman." "She was stubborn as a mule," Daniel replied, returning the smile. "But she raised me when my parents couldn't, taught me how to listen before talking." Lillian's gaze softened. "Then she raised you right." Daniel hesitated, then sat down on the bench beside her. For a few seconds they just watched the street. "Officer Harper," Lillian said carefully, "you asked me something earlier." Daniel turned to her. "About something that happened a long time ago." "Yes, ma'am." She exhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone takes before opening a door they've kept locked for decades. "I've been asked many questions in my life, some kindly, some not, most by people who'd already made up their minds." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. "I don't want to push. If you don't want to talk—" "It's not about wanting," she interrupted gently. "It's about whether it matters anymore." He looked at her, truly looked. "It matters," he said, "to me." Lillian studied his face, searching for something. Doubt, judgment, curiosity for the wrong reasons. Instead, she found patience. 22 years ago," she said slowly, "I worked nights at a nursing home, cleaned rooms, changed sheets, sang to folks who forgot their own names." Daniel's heart skipped. The case file mentioned a night janitor. "I had a daughter, Angela. She was 8, bright, asked too many questions, wanted to be a teacher." Her voice wavered just slightly. "That summer, a little boy disappeared from the neighborhood. White child, big story, news vans everywhere." Daniel's breath caught. "Evan Miller." She nodded once. "Yes." Daniel's palms went cold. "I saw something that night, a man carrying a child near the old rail yard. The boy was crying. I recognized him from the flyers." Daniel leaned forward unconsciously. "I went to the police, told them everything, what time, what I saw, even described the car." Her mouth tightened. "They told me I was mistaken, said it was dark, said I was tired from working nights, said maybe I wanted attention." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I kept insisting, so they started asking me questions instead, about my job, my neighborhood, my daughter." She looked down at her hands. "By the end of that week, people were looking at me like I was the suspect." Daniel remembered now. A black woman witness dismissed, a theory quietly abandoned. The case went cold. Then Angela disappeared. Lillian whispered. The words landed like a blow. Daniel felt dizzy. Your daughter? She nodded, eyes fixed on the pavement. Walking home from school, same neighborhood, same week. Daniel's voice dropped. I'm so sorry. They questioned me for hours, asked if I'd hurt my own child, asked if I was confused, asked if I'd made the whole thing up. Her fingers brushed the scar on her wrist unconsciously. When I reached into the broken window at the rail yard to see if there was anything inside that car, that's when I cut myself. Daniel closed his eyes. The scar, the photo, the case file. You were telling the truth, he said hoarsely. She looked at me then, really looked. I always was. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes, but neither of them moved. I never stopped believing, but belief doesn't bring back children, and it doesn't protect women like me. Daniel felt something shift inside him, something heavy, something long ignored. Why didn't you keep pushing? He asked softly. Lillian gave a sad smile. Because every door I knocked on closed harder than the last, and I still had to raise my son, keep food on the table, stay alive. Daniel nodded slowly. The bus driver honked once, impatient. Daniel stood. I'll drive you home. Lillian shook her head. I don't get in police cars anymore. Daniel accepted that without argument. Then I'll walk you the rest of the way. They moved down the street together again, slower now. Officer Harper, Lillian said carefully, you asked me something earlier. Daniel turned to her. About something that happened a long time ago. Yes, ma'am. She exhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone takes before opening a door they've kept locked for decades. I've been asked many questions in my life, some kindly, some not, most by people who'd already made up their minds. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. I don't want to push, if you don't want to talk. It's not about wanting, she interrupted gently. It's about whether it matters anymore. He looked at her, truly looked. It matters, he said, to me. Lillian studied his face, searching for something. Doubt, judgment, curiosity for the wrong reasons. Instead, she found patience. 22 years ago, she said slowly, I worked nights at a nursing home, cleaned rooms, changed sheets, sang to folks who forgot their own names. Daniel's heart skipped. The case file mentioned a night janitor. I had a daughter, Angela. She was 8. Bright, asked too many questions, wanted to be a teacher. Her voice wavered just slightly. That summer, a little boy disappeared from the neighborhood. White child, big story, news vans everywhere. Daniel's breath caught. Evan Miller. She nodded once. Yes. Daniel's palms went cold. I saw something that night. A man carrying a child near the old rail yard. The boy was crying. I recognized him from the flyers. Daniel leaned forward unconsciously. I went to the police, told them everything, what time, what I saw, even described the car. Her mouth tightened. They told me I was mistaken, said it was dark, said I was tired from working nights, said maybe I wanted attention. Daniel clenched his jaw. I kept insisting, so they started asking me questions instead, about my job, my neighborhood, my daughter. She looked down at her hands. By the end of that week, people were looking at me like I was the suspect. Daniel remembered now. A black woman witness dismissed, a theory quietly abandoned. The case went cold. Then Angela disappeared, Lillian whispered. The words landed like a blow. Daniel felt dizzy. Your daughter? She nodded, eyes fixed on the pavement. Walking home from school, same neighborhood, same week. Daniel's voice dropped. I'm so sorry. They questioned me for hours, asked if I'd hurt my own child, asked if I was confused, asked if I'd made the whole thing up. Her fingers brushed the scar on her wrist unconsciously. When I reached into the broken window at the rail yard to see if there was anything inside that car, that's when I cut myself. Daniel closed his eyes. The scar, the photo, the case file. You were telling the truth, he said hoarsely. She looked at me then, really looked. I always was. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes, but neither of them moved. I never stopped believing, but belief doesn't bring back children, and it doesn't protect women like me.
Daniel felt something shift inside him, something heavy, something long ignored. "Why didn't you keep pushing?" he asked softly. Lillian gave a sad smile.
Because every door I knocked on closed harder than the last, and I still had to raise my son, keep food on the table, stay alive. Daniel nodded slowly. The bus driver honked once, impatient. Daniel stood. "I'll drive you home." Lillian shook her head. "I don't get in police cars anymore." Daniel accepted that without argument. "Then I'll walk you the rest of the way." They moved down the sidewalk together again, slower now. "Officer Harper," Lillian said after a moment, "why are you really here?" He stopped, because the truth was he'd been asking himself the same question since he saw that scar. "I think," he said carefully, "that I was put in that parking lot today because I was finally ready to listen." She nodded as if she had expected that answer. They reached her apartment building, old brick, chipped steps, but clean, loved. Daniel set the groceries down inside her door. "Thank you," she said. He hesitated. "Miss Brooks, would you let me look into that old case, officially?" Her shoulders stiffened. "I won't make promises I can't keep, but I won't let it be buried again." She studied him for a long time. Finally, she said, "If you open that door, officer, you'll find more than one truth." Daniel met his gaze. "I'm ready." Lillian nodded slowly. "Then so am I." As Daniel walked back toward his patrol car, the weight of 22 years pressed against his chest, because helping an elderly woman carry groceries was no longer the story. Justice was, and it had been waiting patiently for someone to finally care enough to pick it up. Daniel Harper didn't sleep that night. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall, the same clock his grandmother had kept, its soft click once a comfort, now an accusation. He sat at his small kitchen table, uniform folded neatly over the chair, laptop open but untouched. Lillian Brooks's face lingered in his mind, not just the pain, but the restraint, the way she spoke like someone who had learned long ago that raising her voice only made people stop listening. He finally opened the department's internal database and typed the name he hadn't dared say out loud since the bus stop. Miller, Evan. The file loaded slowly, like it was resisting being seen. Missing child, age 6, case status, unsolved. Daniel scrolled. The familiar chill settled in as the report unfolded. Timelines, witness statements, neighborhood canvases. A flurry of activity at the beginning, then nothing. And there it was. Witness number 3, Brooks, Lillian. Statement deemed unreliable. No follow-up required. Daniel's jaw tightened. He clicked deeper. The attached photo appeared on screen, grainy, black and white. A woman reaching through a shattered car window, a thin line of blood visible on her wrist. The scar. He stared at it for a long time. Then he opened the next file. Brooks, Angela. Missing child, age 8. Case status, presumed runaway. Daniel felt sick. Presumed? 8 years old? No Amber Alert, no press conference, no reward. Just a quiet dismissal. He leaned back, pressing his face to his hands. This wasn't just oversight. This was erasure. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the precinct early, earlier than he ever had. The building smelled like old coffee and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. He headed straight to records. "Morning, Harper," said Frank Mullins, the senior clerk, without looking up from his desk. "You're not usually in this early." Daniel forced a neutral tone. "Couldn't sleep." Mullins chuckled. Welcome to middle age. Daniel slid a slip of paper across the counter. I need hard copies of these 2 cases. Mullins glanced down, eyebrows lifting. Those are ancient. I know. Mullins leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel. Why? Daniel met his gaze. Training review. A lie, thin, but enough. Mullins shrugged. Give me an hour. Daniel thanked him and headed upstairs. At 9:17 a.m., Captain Elaine Roberts called him into her office. Sit down, Harper. Her tone was calm, too calm. Daniel sat. She folded her hands on the desk. You were seen pulling cold case files this morning. Yes, ma'am. Any particular reason? Daniel chose his words carefully. I encountered a witness yesterday from one of those cases. Robert's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind her eyes. That was decades ago. Yes, ma'am. And solved as much as it ever would be. Daniel inhaled. With respect, Captain, it wasn't solved. Silence stretched. Roberts stood and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot below. You're a good officer, but you're young enough to believe every wrong can be corrected if you push hard enough. Daniel remained still. I believe every wrong deserves to be acknowledged. She turned back to him. What exactly are you hoping to find? Daniel didn't hesitate. The truth. Her jaw tightened. You realize reopening something like this could implicate former officers, men who built this department. Yes, ma'am. And if it turns out mistakes were made? Daniel met her eyes. Then we face them. Robert studied him for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. Unofficially, I won't stop you. Officially, this department has no interest in stirring old ghosts. Daniel nodded. Understood. As he stood to leave, she added quietly, Be careful which bones you dig up, Harper. Some of them bite. The box of files arrived just before noon. Daniel carried it to an empty interview room and shut the door. Dust rose as he opened it. Inside were handwritten notes, cassette tapes, photographs, and reports typed on machines older than him. He spent hours reading. Patterns emerged. Witnesses dismissed for vague reasons, tips unpursued, a suspect vehicle identified, then inexplicably dropped. One name appeared again and again in the margins. Detective Henry Caldwell. Retired. Decorated. Untouchable. Daniel searched Caldwell's background. Commendations, promotions, a reputation for instinct, and beneath it all, complaints quietly closed. By mid-afternoon, Daniel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Officer Harper, this is Mrs. Brooks. Daniel straightened. Miss Brooks, is everything all right? She exhaled shakily. Someone came by today, asked questions. Daniel's stomach dropped. Who? A man, didn't give his name, said he was following up. Daniel clenched his fist. Did he show a badge? She paused. No. Did he threaten you? No, but he warned me, said digging into the past only reopens wounds. Daniel's blood ran cold. I'm so sorry, he said quickly. You shouldn't have been contacted. She laughed softly. Son, I've been contacted my whole life. Daniel closed his eyes. I promise you, I won't let this put you in danger. Another pause. Officer Harper, she said gently, I didn't call because I'm afraid. He listened. I called because that means you're getting close. Daniel swallowed. Yes, ma'am. That evening, Daniel returned to the file room. One cassette tape remained unplayed. Label, Brooks Interview, Original. He inserted it into an old player. Static. Then Lillian's voice, younger, steadier, urgent. I know what I saw. I know that child, and I know that man. The tape cut abruptly. Daniel's heart pounded. Someone had stopped the recording.
He ejected the tape, staring at it like it was evidence of a crime far bigger than 2 missing children. Because it was. As Daniel shut down the recorder, one thing was painfully clear. This wasn't a forgotten mistake. It was a choice. And somewhere in this city, someone was counting on it staying buried. But Daniel Harper wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore.
Daniel Harper stood outside the retirement complex longer than he meant to. The building looked harmless enough. Beige brick, trimmed hedges, a flag fluttering lazily near the entrance. The kind of place where the past was supposed to rest quietly, where reputations were meant to remain polished, untouched by revision. Detective Henry Caldwell lived on the 3rd floor. Daniel checked the address again, even though he already knew it by heart. He wasn't nervous. He told himself that. Still, when he stepped inside and pressed the elevator button, his pulse ticked faster with each floor. 3rd. The doors opened to a long, carpeted hallway that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. Apartment 3C. Daniel knocked once, then waited. Footsteps approached. Slow. Measured. The door opened to reveal a tall, silver-haired man with sharp eyes that hadn't dulled with age. Henry Caldwell wore a pressed cardigan over a collared shirt. He looked exactly like his personnel photo, composed, confident, entirely unafraid. "Yes?" Caldwell said. Daniel showed his badge. "Officer Daniel Harper, Charleston." Caldwell's gaze flicked briefly to the badge, then back to Daniel's face. "I'm retired," he said calmly. "You're late." Daniel didn't blink. "May I come in?" Caldwell considered him for a moment, then stepped aside. The apartment was immaculate. Framed commendations lined the walls, photos of Caldwell shaking hands with former mayors, police chiefs, smiling recruits. A shrine to authority. Daniel stayed standing. "I won't take much of your time," he said. Caldwell gestured to a chair. "Suit yourself." Daniel took a breath. "I'm reviewing an old case. 2, actually." Caldwell's lips curved faintly. "We had hundreds." Angela Brooks. Evan Miller. The temperature in the room changed. Caldwell didn't react immediately, but Daniel saw it, the slightest tightening around the eyes. "Unfortunate cases," Caldwell said. "Sad." "Unsolved," Daniel added. "Life isn't a television show. Not everything gets wrapped up." Daniel leaned forward. "You interviewed Lillian Brooks." Caldwell smiled thinly. "Everyone talked to us back then." "You stopped recording her statement." "That did it." Caldwell's eyes sharpened. "Excuse me?" Daniel placed the cassette tape on the table between them. The recording cuts mid-sentence. Caldwell stared at it for a long moment. Then he chuckled. "You young officers, always hunting ghosts. Tape malfunction. Equipment was garbage back then." Daniel's voice remained steady. "You wrote in your notes that she was emotionally unstable." "She just lost her daughter." "She'd just seen her daughter taken." Caldwell stood. "I think this interview is over." Daniel didn't move. "She has the scar to prove it." Caldwell froze. Slowly he turned back. "What scar?" he asked. Daniel held his gaze. "A cut on her wrist from reaching into a car window matches the photograph in the original file." Silence stretched. Then Caldwell laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You think you've discovered something extraordinary, but all you've found is how this job really works." Daniel's stomach twisted. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Caldwell said, stepping closer, "that sometimes the truth isn't convenient. Sometimes it causes more harm than good." "To whom?" Daniel asked. Caldwell's smile faded. "To the city, to families, to order." Daniel shook his head. "Angela Brooks was 8 years old." "And if I'd told her mother what she wanted to hear, you think that would have brought the girl back?" Caldwell snapped. "No," Daniel said quietly, "but it might have brought justice." Caldwell scoffed. "Justice is a luxury." Daniel straightened. "Not when it comes to children." Caldwell's eyes burned. "You're out of your depth, son." "Then explain to me," Daniel pressed, "why a suspect vehicle was identified, then dropped." Caldwell said nothing.
Why witnesses in that neighborhood were dismissed. Still nothing. Why 2 missing children from the same block were written off within months. Caldwell's voice dropped. Because that block was a powder keg. Daniel stiffened. You didn't want riots, you didn't want media hysteria, and you definitely didn't want fingers pointed where they didn't belong. Daniel's chest tightened. You mean at someone powerful. Caldwell stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You don't get to rewrite history because your conscience woke up late. Daniel met his gaze. History's already written. I'm just reading it. For a moment, Daniel thought Caldwell might strike him. Instead, the older man leaned back. You walk out that door, and you will make enemies you're not prepared for. Daniel turned toward the door. I already have. Outside, the sky had darkened. Daniel sat in his car for minutes before starting the engine. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. Daniel stared at it. Then another. You're risking your career. Then a third. And hers. His hands clenched on the steering wheel. They knew about Lillian. At the precinct the next morning, the atmosphere had changed. Whispers stopped when Daniel passed. Conversations ended mid-sentence. By lunchtime, Internal Affairs requested a routine meeting. Routine. The word tasted like poison. You're operating outside protocol, the IA officer said, folding her hands, pulling files without authorization, contacting civilians. Daniel didn't argue. I followed procedure. You followed your instincts. Daniel met her eyes. Is that a crime? She hesitated. It can be inconvenient. When Daniel left the room, Captain Roberts was waiting. You're pushing this too fast, she said quietly. Someone's already intimidating a witness, Daniel replied. Her eyes darkened. I know. Then help me. She exhaled. If this goes public, it should, Daniel said. Roberts looked away. Once you light this match, there's no putting it out. Daniel nodded. Good. That evening, Daniel drove past Lillian Brooks's building just to check. A black sedan idled across the street. His jaw tightened. He parked down the block and waited. The sedan didn't move. Daniel snapped photos. Then he knocked on Lillian's door. She opened it slowly, fear flickering in her eyes. Officer Harper? You're not alone, and you're not imagining this, Daniel said gently. She nodded. I know. Daniel stepped inside. We're closer than they want us to be, she said softly. Daniel met her gaze. Then we keep going. Outside, the sedan pulled away, but Daniel knew this wasn't over. It was only beginning.
By the end of the week, Daniel Harper understood one thing with painful clarity. This wasn't just an old case. It was a protected one. The first sign came quietly. His patrol schedule changed without warning. Night shifts, solo routes, neighborhoods that never slept and never forgave mistakes. When he asked the sergeant why, the answer came too fast. Staffing needs. The second sign came louder. A formal notice from Internal Affairs appeared in his inbox before noon on Friday. Subject line, Administrative Review, Officer Conduct. Daniel read it twice. Unauthorized access to sealed files. Unapproved contact with civilians. Failure to follow chain of command. The language was clinical, polite, sharp enough to cut without drawing blood. By lunch, everyone knew. Conversations stopped when he entered the break room. A few officers still nodded, the younger ones mostly, but the veterans avoided eye contact, not out of cruelty, out of fear. Captain Roberts called him into her office that afternoon. She didn't offer him a seat. They're moving faster than I expected, she said. Daniel crossed his arms. Because they're scared. They're powerful, she corrected, and you're one officer. He met her eyes. So were you once. Her jaw tightened. They're asking me to suspend you pending review. And are you going to? Daniel asked. Roberts exhaled slowly. Not today. But the way she said it told him everything. That night, Daniel didn't go home. Instead, he parked 2 blocks from Lillian Brooks' building and watched. He told himself it was just precaution, but deep down, he knew better. The black sedan returned just after midnight. Same car, same tinted windows. Daniel photographed it again, noted the plate, different from before. Rotating vehicles. Professional. His phone buzzed. "You can still stop." Unknown number. Daniel typed back only 3 words. "So can you." The reply came instantly. "Last warning." Daniel shut off the phone. Upstairs, Lillian sat alone at her kitchen table, the same way she had for years, hands folded, lights dimmed, listening to every sound outside. The fear never really left her, it just learned to wait quietly. A knock at the door made her flinch. She didn't answer right away. Another knock, gentler this time. "This Brooks," Daniel said softly. "It's me." She opened the door just enough to see his face. "Come in," she whispered. Inside, the apartment smelled like tea and old paper. Boxes lined one wall, decades of life stacked and sealed. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," Daniel replied. "That's why I am." She studied him. "They're watching. I know that too." She sat slowly. "Then you should leave." Daniel shook his head. "Not until you tell me everything." Lillian closed her eyes. "I already did," she said. "They didn't listen then." "I will," Daniel promised. Silence stretched between them, heavy but familiar. Finally, Lillian rose and walked to one of the boxes. She opened it. Inside were folders, old envelopes, yellowed clippings, handwritten notes. "I kept everything," she said. "They thought grief would make me forget." She pulled out a photograph. Angela, 8 years old, braided hair, missing front tooth, smile too big for her face. Daniel swallowed. "She liked jump rope," Lillian said softly. She counted out loud, always skipped the number 4. "Why 4?" Daniel asked. Lillian smiled faintly. She said it felt unlucky. Her smile faded. "She was taken from the bus stop," Lillian continued. 2 blocks from here, broad daylight." Daniel nodded. "Witnesses?" "Plenty," Lillian said, "but none of them were written down." She handed him a notebook. Daniel opened it. Names, dates, addresses. Dozens. "Why wasn't this in the file?" Daniel asked. "Because they told me it didn't matter," Lillian said. "They said I was confusing memories." Daniel's grip tightened. "You weren't." "No," she agreed. "I wasn't." She reached into the box again and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unfolded it carefully. A small red ribbon. Angela's. She dropped it when she was grabbed, Lillian said. "I found it near the curb." Daniel stared at it. Evidence. Physical. Ignored. "Did you show this to the police?" Daniel asked. "Yes," she said. "Detective Caldwell took it. He told me it would help." And I never saw it again." Daniel's jaw clenched. "They didn't just fail you," he said. "They erased you." Lillian nodded. That was the worst part. A loud engine noise outside made them both freeze. Daniel moved to the window. The black sedan idled. This time the headlights flicked on. "They're getting closer," Lillian whispered. Daniel turned back to her. "I'm going to make this public." Her eyes widened. "They'll destroy you." "Then they'll have to do it in the light," he said. The next morning, Daniel didn't leak nothing. Instead, he waited. He let them believe the pressure was working. Internal Affairs scheduled his suspension hearing on Monday. Anonymous complaints appeared online questioning his mental stability. A local blog hinted that he was emotionally compromised. Someone knew exactly where to aim. But they underestimated one thing. People remembered. A retired journalist named Claire Monahan called Daniel that afternoon. "I covered Angela Brooks," she said. "Briefly, my editor pulled the story." "Why?" Daniel asked. "Because someone higher up said it would inflame tensions," Claire replied. "I always regretted listening." Daniel closed his eyes.
I have evidence. Then I have a platform, she said. By Sunday night, the story broke. Not with accusations, with facts. Names, dates, photos, testimonies. Lillian Brooks spoke on camera for the first time in 22 years. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. I was never unstable, she said. I was ignored. The response was immediate. Social media ignited. Former residents from the same neighborhood came forward. Another parent spoke, then another. 2 missing children, same year, same radius. Patterns no one wanted to see. By Monday morning, the precinct was chaos. Captain Roberts called Daniel into her office again. This time she closed the door. You just lit a firestorm, she said. I know, Daniel nodded. The mayor called, she added. So did the chief. And? Daniel asked. Roberts met his eyes. They're reopening the cases. Daniel exhaled for the first time in days. But, she continued, Caldwell has lawyers. So does the truth, Daniel said. Roberts studied him. You're going to lose friends, she warned. Daniel thought of Lillian, of Angela's ribbon, of the scar on her wrist. I already lost patience for silence, he said. Outside, reporters gathered. Inside, decades-old lies began to crack. And somewhere, a man who had believed himself untouchable realized the past was finally knocking back.
By Tuesday morning, the city woke up angry. News vans lined the streets outside police headquarters. Protesters gathered with handmade signs, some demanding justice for Angela Brooks, others accusing the department of corruption, cover-ups, and worse. The air felt electric, brittle, like one wrong word could snap it open. Inside the building, Daniel Harper felt the pressure like a physical weight on his chest. His badge had been confiscated, his gun locked away. Officially, he was on administrative leave pending investigation. Unofficially, he was radioactive. He sat alone in the locker room, the bench cold beneath him, staring at the empty hook where his uniform usually hung. For years, that uniform had been his shield, his identity. Now it felt like a liability. A shadow crossed the doorway. Captain Roberts stepped in, closing the door behind her. They're pushing for your termination, she said without preamble. Daniel nodded. I figured. They're saying you violated protocol, endangered an ongoing investigation, compromised public trust. He looked up at her. Which part isn't true? Her mouth tightened. This isn't about truth anymore. No, Daniel agreed quietly. It's about control. Roberts leaned against a locker. Caldwell's lawyer is already on every channel. As if summoned by her words, Daniel's phone buzzed. A notification. Breaking news. Former detective denies allegations, calls claims baseless and inflammatory. On screen, Robert Caldwell looked calm, distinguished, gray hair neatly combed, a man who knew how to wear authority like armor. I served this city with integrity for over 30 years, Caldwell said to the cameras. These accusations are not only false, they're dangerous. They exploit grief and racial tension for personal agendas. Daniel shut off the screen. Personal agendas, he repeated. They're painting you as obsessed, emotionally compromised, a crusader. Because I helped an old woman carry groceries? Daniel said flatly. Roberts didn't smile. They're also questioning Miss Brooks' mental health, she added. That made Daniel stand. What? They released sealed medical records from the early 2000s, diagnoses taken out of context, anxiety, depression. Daniel's hands curled into fists. They're weaponizing her pain. Yes, and it's working. Across town, Lillian Brooks sat in her living room staring at the television with hollow eyes. The same channels that had praised her courage 2 days ago were now dissecting her grief like a crime scene. Pundits questioned her memory. Commentators speculated about delusions fueled by trauma. One even said, "We have to consider whether her accusations are the result of unresolved loss." Lillian turned off the TV. Her hands trembled. All her life she had been quiet. All her life she had been polite, and still they were trying to erase her. A knock at the door made her heart stutter. She hesitated. Then another knock, firm, official. She opened it to two men in suits. "Miss Brooks, we're from the city attorney's office." Daniel arrived 10 minutes later, breathless. He saw the men leaving, their expressions unreadable. "What did they want?" he asked. Lillian sat slowly. "They offered me a settlement," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "For what?" "For my silence." The room felt smaller suddenly. "They said they'd reopen Angela's case quietly. No press, no names, no blame." Daniel shook his head. "And you said no." She met his eyes. "I told them my daughter deserves more than quiet." Daniel exhaled, something between pride and fear flooding his chest. "You shouldn't be alone," he said. "I've been alone for 22 years. I can handle a few more men in suits." That night, Daniel's car was followed. He knew because the headlights stayed just far enough back, close enough to remind him, not close enough to be obvious. He didn't speed, didn't confront them, just drove. The message was clear. At home, he found his apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken, but his old case files were scattered across the table, opened, shuffled, rearranged. A warning. Daniel sat down slowly, heart pounding. They could ruin him. They could isolate him, but they were also scared enough to cross lines. That meant something. The next blow came Thursday morning. Captain Roberts called him in again. This time her face was pale. "They're charging you," she said. "For what?" "Interference with an active investigation, breach of confidentiality, conduct unbecoming an officer." Daniel nodded slowly. Caldwell pushed it through. "Yes." "Is there any support?" Daniel asked. Roberts hesitated. "Off the record?" she said. "Yes," quietly, from people who remember. "On the record?" he asked. She shook her head. "They won't risk it, not yet." Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions as Daniel walked by. "Officer Harper, are you abusing your position? Do you regret reopening this case? Did you fabricate evidence?" He didn't answer. Across the street, Lillian stood watching. When Daniel reached her, she took her arm. "They're trying to break you," she said softly. Daniel looked down at her. "They already tried that once. I survived." The hearing was brutal. Caldwell's lawyer spoke with confidence, dismantling Daniel's actions point by point. This officer acted without authorization. He accessed sealed files. He leaked information to the press. Daniel listened. When it was his turn, he stood slowly. "I accessed files because a crime was buried. I spoke to the press because the system failed, and if that costs me my badge, so be it." Murmurs rippled through the room. Outside the courthouse, protesters chanted Lillian's name. Inside, something shifted. That evening, an email arrived in Daniel's inbox. Anonymous. One sentence. "I was there." Attached, a scanned police report. Incomplete, redacted, but real. A patrol officer from 22 years ago had written it, describing a man matching Caldwell's description near the bus stop. The report had never been filed. Daniel forwarded it immediately. To the journalist, to internal affairs, to the DA. By midnight, the narrative cracked. Caldwell's lawyers scrambled. The city issued a statement announcing an independent review. Captain Roberts called Daniel one last time that night. Her voice was quiet. "They're backing off," she said. "For now." Daniel leaned back, exhaustion crashing over him. "And Caldwell?" he asked. Roberts paused. "He's not as untouchable as he thought." Daniel looked out the window. The street was empty, but he knew this wasn't over, because when power starts to fall, it doesn't go quietly. And neither did the truth. The witness came forward on a rainy Friday morning. Not with cameras, not with lawyers, but with shaking hands and a conscience that had waited too long. His name was Thomas Avery, 59 years old, retired transit supervisor, former city patrol officer, briefly, back when the department still pretended to believe in community policing. Daniel Harper was drinking cold coffee in his apartment when the knock came. 3 short taps. He froze. Then another knock, softer this time. "Daniel?" a man's voice called through the door. "I'm not here to hurt you." Daniel opened it slowly. The man standing there looked ordinary. Gray rain jacket, baseball cap pulled low, eyes tired in a way that came from decades of carrying something heavy. "I was there," the man said immediately, "the night Angela Brooks died." Daniel's chest tightened. "Come in," he said quietly. Thomas sat on the edge of the couch, wringing his hands. "I've replayed that night for 22 years," he said. "I told myself staying quiet was the safest thing, for my job, my family." Daniel said nothing. "I saw Caldwell," Thomas continued, "arguing with the girl at the bus stop. He was angry. She was scared." Daniel leaned forward. "What happened next?" "She tried to walk away," Thomas said. "He grabbed her arm. She pulled free. She screamed." His voice cracked. "I should have stepped in." Daniel's jaw tightened. "But you didn't," he said softly. Thomas nodded, shame flooding his face. "By the time I got close," he whispered, "she was on the ground, and Caldwell was already on his phone." The room felt like it was closing in. "What did he say?" Daniel asked. Thomas swallowed. He said, "This didn't happen." Silence stretched between them. "And the report?" Daniel asked. "I wrote it," Thomas admitted. "Then I was told to destroy it. They said it would ruin lives." Daniel exhaled slowly. "And now?" Thomas looked up. "Now I'm tired of being afraid." Within hours, Daniel connected Thomas to the DA's office. This time there were no delays, no deflections, no quiet threats, because once one witness spoke, others listened. By Saturday afternoon, a former dispatcher came forward, then a retired medical examiner. Each story overlapped just enough to paint a picture no one could ignore. Caldwell had been protected, systematically, deliberately. The city tried to get ahead of it. They released statements promising full transparency and institutional accountability. But it was too late, because transparency looks different when it's forced. Across the city, people gathered, not in anger this time, but in quiet resolve. Candles appeared at the old bus stop where Angela Brooks had last been seen alive. Someone taped her photo to the shelter wall, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Daniel stood there with Lillian as the rain slowed to a mist. "They finally see her," Lillian whispered. Daniel nodded. "They always did. They just chose not to listen." That evening, Daniel received another call. Unknown number. "This is Special Investigator Monroe," the voice said. "We need to speak with you, privately." They met in a neutral office downtown. Monroe didn't waste time. "We're building a criminal case against Robert Caldwell, and we want your help." Daniel leaned back. "You fired me," he said. "We suspended you," Monroe corrected. "There's a difference." "And now?" she asked. "Now we want to reinstate you, quietly, as a consultant." Daniel laughed once, bitterly. "You don't get to turn me on and off," he said. Monroe met his gaze. "You're right," she said. "So don't do it for us. Do it for her." She slid a file across the table. Inside were names, dates, patterns. Daniel's blood ran cold. "This goes deeper than Caldwell," Daniel said. "Much," Monroe nodded. That night, Caldwell resigned. The announcement came just before midnight. Health reasons, his statement said. Family considerations, a desire to avoid distraction. No apology, no accountability. But resignation isn't justice, and people knew it. Daniel stood on his apartment balcony, watching police lights flicker in the distance. His phone buzzed. A text from Captain Roberts. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner." Another from a number he didn't recognize. "My sister was one of the girls they ignored too. Thank you." Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, the weight shifted. Not gone, but lighter. The next day, Daniel returned to the station, not in uniform, not with authority, but with something stronger. Truth. Officers avoided his gaze. Some nodded. Others looked away. In a back office, Captain Roberts waited. "I owe you," she said. Daniel shook his head. "You owe her," he replied. News broke by noon. Charges were being considered. Evidence was mounting. Witnesses were protected. And Caldwell's carefully built legacy cracked under the weight of its own lies.
Lillian watched the coverage from her living room, hands folded. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to cry, not in grief, but in relief. Angela's name was being spoken with respect, with care, with truth. Daniel sat beside her. "It's not over yet," he said. "I know, but it's started." Outside, the city moved, slower, quieter, but something fundamental had shifted. Because once silence breaks, it never goes back together the same way.
The courtroom was quieter than Daniel expected. No shouting, no gasps, just the low hum of breathing, the shuffle of shoes, and the weight of years pressing down on every wooden bench. Daniel sat in the second row, hands clasped, eyes forward. Beside him, Lillian Brooks wore a simple navy dress and the same pearl earrings she'd worn to Angela's funeral 22 years ago. Her back was straight, but her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Across the aisle, Robert Caldwell sat at the defense table. No uniform, no badge, no protective wall of authority. Just a man in a gray suit, shoulders hunched, jaw tight, eyes darting toward exits that no longer existed. When the judge entered, everyone rose. And when they sat again, something irreversible settled into the room. The prosecutor didn't rush. She let the silence stretch. Then she spoke. "This case is not about a single night," she said. "It's about a system that decided some lives were disposable and some men were untouchable." Daniel felt Lillian's breath catch. Witness after witness took the stand. Thomas Avery, the retired dispatcher, the medical examiner. Each voice layered truth upon truth until denial had nowhere left to hide. Then came the moment no one had prepared for. Lillian was called. Daniel stood immediately. She touched his arm gently. "I can do this," she whispered. Slowly, deliberately, she walked to the stand. She did not cry, she did not shake. She spoke like a woman who had waited her entire life to be heard. "My daughter was 21, she said. She loved old movies and peppermint candy. She wanted to be a teacher." She looked directly at Caldwell. "You took her life," Lillian said calmly, "and then you stole her truth." Caldwell dropped his gaze. "I lived with your lie for 22 years, she continued, "but you lived with the truth. Every day." The courtroom held its breath. When Lillian stepped down, Daniel helped her back to her seat. She squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, thank you for seeing her." The verdict came after 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. There was no cheer, no applause, just a long collective exhale. Caldwell closed his eyes. For the first time, the room belonged to the truth. Outside, reporters crowded the courthouse steps, microphones shoved forward, cameras flashing. Daniel stopped at the edge of the stairs. "No comment," he said quietly. Lillian stood beside him. When a reporter asked if justice had been served, she answered herself. "Justice doesn't bring my daughter back, but it makes sure her name isn't buried again." That night, Daniel returned to the old bus stop. The candles were gone, the photos weathered, but someone had left fresh flowers. Daniel stood there a long time. He thought about the badge he no longer wore, the career that had ended, the man he had become. He didn't regret it. The next morning, Daniel received a letter from the department. A formal apology, a reinstatement offer, back pay, a chance to return. He read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Instead, he accepted another offer: community liaison, civilian oversight, independent review board. No gun, no uniform, just accountability. Lillian moved differently now. Lighter, still grieving, but no longer carrying the weight alone. On Angela's birthday, the city unveiled a small plaque at the bus stop. "Angela Brooks, beloved daughter, remembered." Daniel stood at the edge of the crowd. When the ceremony ended, Lillian approached him. "They want me to speak at schools," she said softly.
About Angela. About silence. Daniel smiled. She'd like that. Lillian reached into her purse. She handed Daniel a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. "My address," she said. "Your family now." Daniel swallowed. As he walked away, the city felt different. Not healed, but honest. And honesty, he knew, was where healing began. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens. Sometimes it arrives quietly. With one man stopping to help an elderly woman carry groceries and refusing to walk away when the past finally speaks.